Given the theme coding horrors, I thought it would be appropriate if we all faced our greatest fear and talked about legacy code and some of the techniques I've been using to refactor legacy code. So we're going to talk about presenting the right interface, making business rules explicit, and separating configuration from logic. So maybe someone comes to you and asks you to add a new feature to your code base, and they say, can you get it to send an email at this point in the system? So what you do is you search the code base and find out how emails are currently sent, and eventually you come across this function. So you spend sort of half an hour maybe reading the code to find out what all these different parameters do, what the defaults mean, and you think, well, it'd be a lot nicer if I had something simpler to work with. So we're going to talk about presenting the right interface. So probably this is something that's a bit nicer. You just got an email address, a subject, a body, and if it fails, it's going to throw an exception that seems appropriate. And then we're going to implement it using our legacy code. So we're loading in the old library there, and we're going to pass in our parameters that we actually wanted. We've got our subject and our email address and our body, and then we've filled in all the other weird parameters that we weren't really sure about with defaults that make sense, and we're throwing our exception there. So what we've done is we've created something that fits our actual use case, rather than having a load of code where we don't really understand what all the. It's going to be difficult to come back and change later because we don't really know what all the parameters mean. We spend ages trying to understand it. It's a lot simpler for what we need. And also, when you want to replace that legacy implementation, all you have to do is create a new implementation. And it also means you can incrementally migrate to the new one. So you can just change one instance of it to the new one, rather than having to change the whole system all at once. So, and then if you might think, oh well, the old system was the old function was a lot more flexible. We could do things like add attachments and stuff. Well, what I would say is, if you've got a different use case, then create another thing for your actual use case. So if you've got one that can also add attachments, so if you need to use that specifically, you can use that one specifically. Cool. So I'm lost here. Hang on. So maybe you're going to come across something like this in your code, and it's definitely got some kind of logic going on in there, but you're not exactly sure what it means. There's roll 6 equals, I don't really know what that means, but what it does mean is it's going to show the form so the user can edit the post. So what we're going to do is try and make the business rule explicit. So we're going to create a function on a new method on our user class called has permissions to edit post. And we're just going to grab our old code there and shove it in there. And now when we look at our original code, it pretty much reads as to what it does. So it says, if the current user has permissions to edit the post, then do the thing we're going to do. And so the business rule is clearly named. You don't have to read the code in detail and try and find out what it means to be able to tell what's going on. It also means the rules are consistent across the code base. So if you need to do that same thing again, you don't have the risk of somebody typing 5 when they meant 6, and that kind of thing. So it's reusable. And then you could do a bit more. So maybe we find out what role equals 6 means, and we find out that means the user is an administrator. Maybe we can add a couple more methods, like user is author of post, or post was written by user. And that means when we look at our code now, when we want to find out if a user has permission to edit the post, it says, is the user the author of the post, or is the user an administrator? And everyone can really easily tell what the rule means. Hang on, sorry, I'm getting lost again. Cool, so I was looking at this code, and it was some configuration for a form library. So it's building up an array of configuration. But it's kind of doing it incrementally for some reason. It's like creating the first element and adding another element, another element, another element. So I thought it would be nice if we could just implement that, just declare it in a single block of code. It would be a lot simpler. But the thing is, you've got a bit of logic in here as well to say only do this bit in some situations. So what we're going to try and do is separate the configuration from the logic. So what we've done here is just declare it in a single variable, like I said, but what we've also done is just add a flag on here to say only includes it for the admin users. So that kind of bit of logic has kind of moved into the configuration part, and then what we're going to do is just use a filter function to be able to filter over the array, and if that element exists, we're going to check if they're an administrator or not. And so if you're not eligible to have that bit of configuration, it's going to strip it back out again. And what that means is the configuration, it's not stored in line with your code. It can be moved out separately into a separate file in a database or wherever is easiest to maintain. It means it's not bloating your code that you have to look at every day. It's just kind of stored in a separate configuration bit. It means the logic becomes a lot clearer. Also means that logic can potentially be reused across the application. So what we've done here is split that filter function out into a class, and we're going to tell it what the user is, and we've got our same function there. And all we're doing is applying it as an array filter to get rid of our the stuff that we don't need, and end up with our filtered array. So that's it. We've done presenting the right interface, we've made business rules explicit, and we've separated configuration from logic. And that's it.